Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on another edition of Politics of Self. Today, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Joanna from London. Thank you for joining me again this month, Joanna.
You're welcome. Hi, Joe. Hi, everyone.
All right, so today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about debt and what debt actually is. A lot of people already have an idea of what debt is when we use that word, but today we're going to dive a little bit deeper and explore how debt has been so much a part of our lives that it may have influenced us in ways that we hadn't considered before. So for a lively discussion today on debt, please do join us in the comment section and in the live Q&A. Feel free to ask us questions anytime throughout the Hangout, and we'll address the questions as we can. For a little bit of interactive fun today, I would like to ask every one of our viewers, whether you're viewing this live or you're viewing this on a rebroadcast on YouTube, to go ahead, reach into your pockets or into your wallet or purse or someone else's pockets for all I care. Pull out one of these notes. Pull out one of these dollar bills or euros or whatever you guys have for currency. And what I'd like you to do is take a really good look and find the fine print. Because on these notes, these pieces of paper that we call money, there's going to be something that says something similar to, here's the American $1 bill. I don't know if you can read it, but it says this note is legal tender. This note is legal tender for all debts, private and public. What does that mean? It doesn't actually tell you much other than the fact that it sounds like something very, very federal and legal, and most people probably have never really thought about what this phrase means, but the understanding of this could be key to understanding debt itself. So, Joanna, have you done that exercise? Do you have anything to share about your currency?
Yeah, I do. So here in the UK, you have the Bank of England note, and it says here that I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of, and then the amount, in this case, £10. But again, the promise to pay on demand.
Yeah. So why are we talking about this? Why is the wording so specific? And the reason why it is specific and important to understand is that it's telling you that this piece of paper, that this unit of money that you call money, has no value. What it's telling you, for example, the pound note, it's telling you that I'm promising to pay on demand the sum of X amount of pounds. And we might call those notes the pound note, but that note itself has no value. In other words, when you're paying that note to somebody, you are not paying the sum of that pound. All that you're doing is giving them a receipt that says you're going to promise to pay that eventually when we have access again to real money. Until then, we're going to use these slips of receipts, these IOUs. Now, for our US viewers, how does that relate to us? Well, it's the exact same thing. The dollars that we use have no value. There was one point in history when it did, that was back before 1913. It was quite a while ago when money used to be backed by gold and silver and all kinds of other things that, gave the money a kind of substance. You could at least trust that this is worth X amount of silver or gold or something tangible and real. But what happened after that was that once we lost that value, once we lost that backing, all that we ended up with was just these IOUs, these promises, these little slips of paper that say legal tender. And it says legal tender because we are no longer able to pay off debt. And this is true because in law, you can only pay off debt using real money. And real money has to have a real value. Now, what happens if you take that value away? For example, the US currency no longer backed by anything at all. So this is not money. This is legal tender. And all that you can do with legal tender is, you know, you can pass on these bills to one another and say you're discharging your debts. But the debt never goes away because you can't pay the debt with more debt. All that we're doing is kind of kicking the can further down the road, hoping that one day we'll have a real money again or have some way of really discharging and taking off the debt for real. But until that happens, all that we're doing is passing debt along to each other. And this has a lot more ramifications that we're going to dive into. But firstly, I wanted everybody to kind of get familiar with this idea and really cement this truth that, you know, these things that we're passing around is not value, is not money, that we're passing around pieces of paper, pieces of receipts for debt. So let me open this up to you, Joanna. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's, you know, to be honest, we're never educated to understand how this is all came about and how our lives are so, well, limited, but at the same time, we're sold to believe that this is actually good for us, that this is all we know. And my thoughts on that is that because we never questioned that, then it became a way, a lifestyle, a way of living, a way of thinking of ourselves, of our lives, of feeling that we don't own the resources or that we need to fight for them, while at the same time we're always compromising our future. And that is something that you learn. So I'm originally from Portugal, and quite early you understand that the situation is not sustainable. And when you see your family or friends actually going into debt in order to save other members of the family, and how that snowball affects you so much on a personal level, like psychologically, when you're as a parent, you spend all your time making up for that debt in order to buy you time to live and to be with your children. It's just the way of even looking at, and we can look at the semantics of the word debt and death, how similar they are. And even other words that we can look at, like mortgage and the words of it, and even mortgage, if you look at the Latin origin, is morte, and in Portuguese, actually, mort means death. So it's it kind of makes you think about the whole life and how, at least from childhood, how you see that everything, looking back at big moments of our life, they were actually marked by either a situation where we were able to overcome that, like the happy moment, or the moments where it actually went down, where things are really bad and you feel that struggle. And it is quite absurd now to come into adulthood and to see that all adults still believe that that's the only way to live and to exist, and to pass it on to the children, and to keep this legacy of debt, basically. Oops, I just realized that the camera was on you all the time. So in essence, it's just like creating this burden into our lives, and this weight that we believe that that's the way it just needs to exist. And it took me a few years, and it actually became like part of the discussions with you, Joe, over the years, and with other people interested in these topics, that I started to question. But it was like hidden in plain sight, basically. I wasn't aware of it. Yeah, and we use notes every day.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of like you're in a prison and the bars are right in front of your face. But because you stand so close, you know, the bars are right here, and they become so familiar that you start to learn to see through it and past it, and you stop questioning why you seem to be stuck here and can't go any further. So that's kind of what happened with our relationship to debt, and understanding how we constantly are allowing ourselves to be put into positions of servitude, positions of being limited, positions of, and having our value extracted out of us for the benefit of a few, while most of the hard work, the labor, the consequences are shouldered by a large portion of people who don't get the equal benefit. And
Yeah.
this is a trend that unfortunately has been with us for a very long time. So one of the things I wanted to open up today when we look at the word debt is to take it so that it's not just in the context of money. I mean, yeah, we are all in debt. Every person alive right now has to be in some form of debt just to get by, whether you're talking about personal debt or having to take out a loan to get your education, or even to buy a car. Sometimes you need to take out a loan just to afford the financing. You know,
Yeah.
so there's that element, that surface level of debt that we know. But there's also the question of the relationships that we accept when it comes to the word debt. And this has to do with the idea that we somehow are not good enough in and of ourselves, that we apparently have no value that we can draw upon, that we need to borrow external value from somewhere else, from someone else, in order for us to then be redeemed, to then be considered worthy. It's as though if you don't have debt in this world, you are valued less. So the value for most people is not how much you can create or contribute because you're alive. No, the value for most people has to become how much debt can you take on? And this is true because when you look at things like credit scores and things that measure how much debt you're able to take on, that's what businesses and lending institutions look at. And here in the United States, if you want to rent a property, or if you want to sign an agreement with a landlord for a place to live, one of the first things they're going to ask for is your credit score. They want to look at how much debt you've been able to take on and can you pay that debt off. It doesn't look at how much value you can create as a human being or how much you can contribute simply because you're alive. It's looking at this wholly skewed way of living that we've all come to accept. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I understand you guys, I'm sure every first world country has something similar to a credit score system. What is it like there in the UK?
It's very similar. Yeah, we do have the credit score. So even if you want to have your monthly phone, you would go through the credit score, and depending how good it is or how bad it is, then you may or may not receive that and be accepted to pay your loan back, basically. Because even when you have a phone, you have that monthly payment, and that means that they are actually lending you that money in advance, and you will gonna pay every month that amount. But the total sum, you don't own that. So you don't own the phone. You're gonna own the phone 2 years later, for example. So, which, you know what, when I got to hear that, I didn't have any debt before, and I was like, whoa, I thought that not having any debt, that's what you're supposed to live. That's when you're like free, or that's when you can actually take decisions because you don't have that weight. But in fact, you actually are recommended, even if you want to have enough credit score to request a mortgage or any other like a big sum of money that the bank can give you, then it's going to be they're going to look at that credit score. And it's just, for me, it was quite incredible. And I know a lot of people that were not aware of it, and even they were like, oh, I don't want to have a credit card because I know how dangerous that can be. However, owning a credit card and using it actually increases your credit score. So it's like you don't want to be in debt, but you need to be in debt in order to kind of move yourself and to purchase things in your life. Well, yeah, kind of. But
Man, it's just it's crazy to think about all the dimensions that debt has played a role in. I was just thinking now about the idea of having the credit score. It's just so counterintuitive. It's, I mean, it's, you can just look at the design of it and you can tell that the system wants more debt, because debt is actually how the system is able to keep itself running. And big part of that is something that we touched upon when we first started the hangout, which is when money lost its intrinsic value in gold and silver. Money became something totally warped and different. Most people understand that money has become fiat currency, meaning it's not backed by anything other than the say-so of the government. But that's not really true. Money is still backed by something, and this may be kind of a shock to some people that don't, that haven't gotten into this element of our history, which is that in the place of gold and silver and things like that, money became backed by people. Money became backed by the life and labor of the citizens of the nations, you know, the birth certificates and all of the future values that a person can bring into the world became the property of the financial institutions. And the reason is, you know, when the nation became bankrupt and found itself needing credit, where did it turn? It turned to the banks, just like any human being would. When your life takes a turn and you need financial support, where do you go? You go to the banks because you need the loan, you need the money, you need a line of credit. And in order to get that line of credit, you have to pledge something. You have to give something up as collateral. For some, it might be your home. For some, it might be future wages on your job. Well, what does a nation pledge in order for it to get a line of credit? The nation pledges its citizens. The nation pledges the labor. Yeah, your person, your personhood. So all of the money and the funds that have been coming out ever since that change has been funded by the life force of people. You're literally born into debt. You're born in sin, so to speak. And you're living the entirety of the rest of your life in this acceptance that you're born with the negative value that you need to constantly work to redeem and work off. Instead of you know, you coming into the world as your own asset, you are a credit in and of yourself. But no, instead we've been conditioned to accept that credit comes from somewhere outside of us, that we need to secure, you know, our line of credit and be worthy of taking on debt, as though that's the only way to get by, that's the only way to keep things funded. So to touch a little bit onto this, you know, this idea that, you know, we are living in a system that parasitically already stakes a claim on everything that you own, everything that you will do, everything that you will be in this world, in your life. And it uses that as its own collateral to fund itself. And then it has the audacity to lend you money and expect you to pay for the financing of it. And this is a terrible deal. If we saw this in writing, I doubt anybody would willingly agree to this. So for those who are interested in getting the details, we can provide resources and links, of course. But I wanted to get your feedback on this. What are how do you feel about where we are, you know?
Yeah. Well, Joe, it's just that, you know, while you're describing that, and even before the discussion, this actually reminds me the institutions are actually supporting it and backing it up. And if we look at religion, and well, in Portugal, you have Christianity, and you're deeply kind of, your upbringing is really deeply involved in that. And you're educated that you need to redeem yourself. You need to redeem yourself for your sins. And there's a God that you have to pray for in order to be released and to live and to be free from it. And that's a similar process, because, and many religious people will know that, is that you, let's say if you're sick and then you pray a lot and then you get cured, then you're going to pay it back. You have this promise to God. And that actually reminds me the bank note, where you promise to pay it back. And even in the $1 note, you have "In God We Trust." So it's so everything. If you look then into society, how it is built, from the very religious institutions that use the same principle of you being blessed in your life, and therefore you need to pay back either in money or in other ways. or actually your life itself, in your effort to give yourself that life back. And that is such a, I don't know, it's a scam. It's just like selling you something that you're not supposed to even be sold in the first place.
Right. It's kind of like if I were to go to your house and take all of your stuff and then sell it back to you.
Yeah.
Right? It makes no sense, but that's exactly how the system works, and that's kind of the relationship we've accepted throughout history too. This idea that there is a better class, a ruling class, that come into power through whatever means, and they stay in power, mainly through the continued acceptance of those who are enslaved. Now, of course, there are conditions where people become enslaved because they can't fight back equally. So that is an element that has to be addressed. But overall, in modern time, we find that those who are most enslaved are actually the ones that are enslaving themselves and each other willingly, through a kind of ignorance of how the system has played into our insecurities and into our innate, perhaps our individual ideas and beliefs that maybe we're not good enough. Maybe we need to continue to follow authorities that tell us that we need to behave a certain way in order to be accepted, in order to be redeemed, in order to be acknowledged. It's kind of like we never leave that mindset of who we are as children and our parents. We're constantly being shaped and molded and having to respond to authority and be good kids.
And it starts at school.
It starts at school. I mean, it starts in every facet. The moment you enter the world, already there's already this intrinsic expectation that you have to obey the authority because you owe the authority for your well-being, for your life. You owe your parents for giving birth to you. You owe your government for giving you security. You owe God for your spiritual wellness. You owe. You're born in sin. You're born in debt. You're born unwhole, unworthy, unloved. It's such a self-deprecating acceptance of who we are. And that doesn't have to be. And I find that when we start challenging that, at first it requires a personal transformation first, but then you start to see how many layers we've accepted in the world because of that internal acceptance. And this comes to just this word, debt, that we haven't fully opened up. We haven't fully questioned. Debt. What is debt when it's not just about money? Debt is about this unequal relationship of one having not enough and needing to compromise itself in order to get that enoughness.
Yeah, it's a sort of powerlessness that we have accepted to direct our lives, to create our lives, and then it can easily go into this point of blame, like blaming the system, blaming everybody else. But at the same time, as you said, there is that personal transformation that must happen where we allow ourselves to question how we've been thinking about everything from the very beginning. And then obviously money will be part of it as well, because it's a big element in everyone's lives. And then it became so important that our lives these days depend on it. Like if you need a doctor, you need money. Everything. And replace that, even though we're capable of doing better, and we notice, like when you have simple moments of your unconditional giving something to another, or someone does something for you and not expecting a return or anything to be paid back, you feel like grateful. That's true compassion, true gratefulness. But you don't see that. There's an exchange, but it's not an exchange of actually based on reality. It's a value-made exchange that does not take into consideration our whole beingness and our potential and the whole ecosystem, like how much like the resources how are being exploited on our behalf without actually considering its sustainability, because the whole system in itself and debt in itself, it's in constant destruction, like our own destruction of who we are.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest dangers of this debt system that we've all kind of unwittingly signed into. It's that everything is now financialized. Everything now has a price. And instead of looking at things for the actual value of it intrinsically, everything is rather valued based on its financial gain. Everything's based on how much you can profit, because we have a system where the very money that we're using, the very currency that we're using, is a negative value. We're constantly trying to look for that way of paying it back, and only finding ourselves deeper in debt because we haven't seen the link to that. So the biggest danger I see is that, you know, we're going to keep continuing to consume and continue to try to pay back, not realizing that we never in fact owed. You know, when a debt is onerous, it is actually kind of foolish to continue paying it because you're buying into more enslavement. So, you know, I strongly suggest everyone to really dig in and look at this word debt, and, you know, pull it out of just being in the context of money, but question, you know, who are you? What are you giving up? What are you abdicating yourself for? What are we accepting when we as a society are saying that, you know, debt must be honored, when we don't question the source of that debt?
Yeah, very cool. Just let you know that we have a question. Shall we look into that right now, or is there any other?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So let me pull it up. It's from Marlon, and Marlon asks, "What do you guys say our current reality would be like without debt? How would it change our lives if we suddenly had no money as debt, as a living right, recognizing there is no owing later to anyone? Is this far-fetched thinking?" Well, thank you, Marlon. That is like that's where we want to take us.
Yes. Well, is this far-fetched thinking? Yes. This is radical and dangerous thinking. And the reason why I say that is because this upsets the currently accepted paradigm that we have, which is that you have to keep working and you have to keep profit going. And if people are just given everything, you know, then they're not going to work and they're not going to better themselves and they're not going to contribute. And that comes out of the way that we've allowed ourselves to be conditioned. So it is radical and far-fetched thinking for now, because we haven't yet broken through and become aware of the fact that we have to change that within ourselves first. We have to stop our own thinking patterns about that. So, you know, if we tomorrow woke up in a world where debt was no longer an issue, where our money was actually no longer based on debt and constantly having to pay back and constantly having to compromise ourselves, it still relies on us to not repeat the old pattern, right? It still relies on us to change our behavior and how we approach our lives. Now, obviously, we do need to eventually get to that point where we're not using debt anymore to finance things, because that just makes no sense. But once we get to that point, we have to then realize that, you know, we have the opportunity. We've always, in fact, had the opportunity to do things differently, to wake up in the morning with purpose, and to, you know, attack the day with a lust and joy for life. Because guess what? I don't owe this day to anyone. I don't owe these hours to anyone. I'm not working because I have a mortgage to pay off. I'm not working because if I don't have money, I won't be fed. I'm not, you know, participating in things just because I won't be able to survive or provide for my family or do other meaningful things with my life if I don't, you know, buy into this system. Right? So these are the questions that we have to address at a fundamental, individual, and physical level. And it takes a lot of effort, because we have to bring that out of theory and into application, while we're still in the current system of debt and having to kind of compromise ourselves. But how I envision the world without debt is a world where we finally realize the power of responsibility, when we stop waiting for authorities to govern and shape us because of, you know, beliefs that we're not good enough or beliefs that we're unworthy. When we change that, we can literally change the world, change how we do everything. Where it's no longer about what I need to gain in order to make enough profit in order to survive. It becomes about what can I create, because it's fun to create, and life is meant to be enjoyed and explored by everyone.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add is that institutions and the world itself is a big mirror of our individual beings. So that is going to have that effect. So it's going to be when that individual awareness comes up and we apply that in the institutions we currently even work and in the societies we're in and everything we do, then that's going to be like a symbiosis and of like, it's almost impossible like right now to imagine what that would be, but at the same time it's what we ought to go to, and it's good. It's
Yes.
important to have that in our minds too, that we're working towards that, and that our individual, as you were saying, individual responsibility will have an impact in whatever we're doing. So, and looking specific into debt is in looking at international debt and how the big institutions like IMF currently exist. It's because there's a need for that. There's a service that needs to be provided. But once that is no longer in, then well, to be honest, like a lot of problems would cease to exist to begin with, because many nations and poverty in itself is based on that debt. So that would be at least the minimum requirements that we need to live will actually be backed up by those resources, for example, and that would definitely change a lot of things in the world and how it is so polarized at the moment, where wealth is on one side and poverty in the other, and then that's causing so many other problems in society at an individual level. So it will definitely take that. It will be a trigger to both institutional and international base, but also individual. And how, and if we recognize that it is possible and that we would be willing to even try, then that will be possible. But there's a lot of attachments that we first need to go through to release, like the fact that before I would never question my religion. And I would question my authority to God, and how that I was based so many of my decisions of anything, even my career, based on that, and that is affecting even the world outside, because then who I am in my actions in my daily job was different. How it is now that I'm questioning and not and actually taking that responsibility back and the commitment. That before wasn't there, so I was accepting things how they were. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting, Marlon.
Yeah, awesome question. Thank you, Marlene. I don't think there's other questions at the moment. So, Joanna, did you have any other points that you wanted to wrap up with?
Well, we talked about like the international and well, this dependency that we created, and even it's currently some interdependency, and we still see the way the world is like, even resources, how we indebt ourselves in relation to those, but we are probably, there's a lot of risk, for example, to look at alternatives. So even in that case, in that sense, I was thinking earlier about how the world would be without debt. Is like, we're actually going to look at projects that are worth it and that are really beneficial, and that will not create further consequences, and those will be the projects that will actually pass and go into application. So I was thinking that perhaps there's this idea that if if the current system as we know suddenly changes, it will be a chaos and people don't know what to do and all the order goes into chaos. And it's actually, I'm reading a really interesting book on chaotic organization and how it challenges this whole idea of authority into bringing something that is for a common purpose. And it is possible. It's going to be a big challenge, but it is possible to bring these concepts of leadership and what being a leader it really means, and then apply that into, for example, into new ways of doing things, new institutions, and eventually create those solutions that currently are a bit out of our hands because there's a lot of risk, for example, in that regard. But even risk in itself in the current system is a big thing to question when that happens.
Yeah, and that is a whole other topic, so I won't jump into it. But just very quickly, risk is something that's used to justify why banking institutions and all of that get bailed out and they never get in trouble. Because apparently they take a risk in lending all this money to us when in fact they have zero risk because the money that they're lending comes out of nothing. They literally create the funds and the credit lines out of nothing and lend it to us at profit for them. So I ask, where is the real risk in that? And the risk becomes the people that have to take the loans and pay back. And if they can't pay back, we lose real value. We lose the things that we pledged in order to get that loan. But does the bank actually have real risk? That's an important question to ask. And definitely, go ahead.
Sorry, Joe, I was just going to say what you were describing is predatory lending, right? Where you know that there's these shops, and here in the UK, you also see those where they provide you loans at a really high interest rate. And people tend to use them in really extreme situations where they are still waiting for their salaries to come in, but they already have payments first. So they get those loans. And even though when those loans are made, people are actually not going to be able to pay them back. So they're going to they just start and continue that cycle.
Vicious cycle, yeah.
But it's in everything. It's not only, people think that it's only in this high street, but actually high street banks, they are doing the same, or in anything, because our debt is actually creating more debt. It's just that. It's all we're creating at the moment, unless we kind of don't think of us anymore as debt slaves to begin with.
Yeah, in the absence of radically reforming the system or adopting a new system altogether, we have to realize that we currently do not possess the ability to pay debt. We only have the ability to discharge debt through legal tender currencies, the money that we have in our pockets and our bank accounts that we think has value. They're only really good for, keeping the tax man away, keeping the collectors away to a degree, because the underlying debt that brought all of those currencies into creation has never been paid off and will only continue to accumulate. And that is the lifeblood of the current system. So we really need to focus on educating ourselves and each other on what is actually going on, so that we can make better decisions, more informed decisions when it comes to mobilizing ourselves, when we say, hey, we're ready to change and now we do understand this mechanism. And it also helps to not go into blame, not go into, oh, the bank did this to us. Well, yes, but we also were ignorant, and we continued that ignorance for a long time, which is what allowed all of this to continue happening. So yeah, definitely a lot of points were brought up today for us to chew over and digest. Yeah,
and I would also recommend people to talk more about these situations, to not isolate themselves, and especially parents. I notice that parents want to, I'm sure they have the best intentions, but then sometimes they put themselves into situations without actually being properly advised and actually talking with people and exposing the situation. I mean, everyone is in debt, so there's no shame on that. And we really need to talk about it, know about these cases, and alternative ways to manage our lives and manage our money that will not feed this constant kind of, it's more like a mindset, but it became a culture of asking credit for everything and to believe that that's going to actually solve our problems, which in the short term it feels like it, but there's this whole homework that needs to be done to be fully aware of the implications of it in the long term.
Definitely. Cool. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. For those of you who joined us, thank you very much. You may now put your little dollars and notes back into your pockets or wherever you got them from. But do remember as you do that this currency that we're carrying is not value. We're passing along receipts of debt. And I'd like us to really keep that in mind throughout the course of your day. Whenever you're spending money, are you spending money or are you just trading debt? And definitely do check out more of the history of what happened to us. When I say us, it's not just the United States, but us as humanity, our role, our relationship to the debt system that has become now global and is a global concern. Also check back with us on our regularly scheduled time slot with your regularly scheduled host, Marlene, who will continue the good fight to bring the word to people about alternative solutions and ways to further educate ourselves and each other. For Politics of Self, I am Joe, and thank you again, Joanna, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody out there. Please rate, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you in the comments. Thank you.